A mysterious hole in the middle of the ocean on Google Maps, a sunken land beneath the North Sea that was home to hundreds of thousands of people, an entire continent that quietly and secretly vanished beneath the Atlantic, a structure in the middle of the desert that looks like a landing pad for aliens, and a 3.5 billion-year-old crater in Australia that turns our understanding of Earth upside down. Today I'm taking you to the most enigmatic places on our planet, and I promise you some of these stories will stay with you for a long time. So be sure to stick around until the end. Welcome, everyone. Our Earth is brimming with mysteries that amaze even experienced scientists. Let me know what you find more exciting, the mysteries of our own Earth or the mysteries of space. And it's exactly these kinds of mysteries that this channel is all about. If you never want to miss a thing, go ahead and subscribe. It's free and you'll be helping me out a lot. And if you're already subscribed, giving the video a thumbs up helps it a lot. Thanks a lot, everyone. Let's start with a phenomenon that's currently sweeping across social media. A structure has appeared on Google Maps that at first glance looks like a giant drain in the middle of the ocean. What's really behind it? Let's take a look together. It happens time and again that someone discovers a curiosity on Google Maps that the internet then discusses for weeks on end. A few months ago, for example, someone discovered 2 dancing aliens in the Mojave Desert in the US. The artwork carved into the ground most likely dates back to the ancestors of today's Mojave Indians. Normally, you can only visit these Native American artworks with a guide, but Google Maps offers an easier and more affordable alternative. Another mysterious discovery was the seemingly sunken city in the sea, a once thriving city swallowed up forever by the merciless clutches of the ocean? No. It is the British Horsburgh Lighthouse on the small archipelago of Pedra Branca, which today belongs to Singapore. The fact that the buildings appear to be underwater is just an optical illusion. After all, buildings underwater is completely unrealistic. But let's talk about the hole in the middle of the ocean. If you'd like to check it out for yourselves, I'll include the coordinates here. You'll need to enter these coordinates into Google Maps and switch to satellite view. At first glance, it really does look like a hole. And it's not entirely impossible because such depressions within the oceans are technically possible. The technical term for this is blue hole, and they occur primarily in coastal reefs. Here, for example, you can see a blue hole in the Red Sea off the coast of Egypt. Another example is the Great Blue Hole in Belize, which looks absolutely picturesque and visually is somewhat reminiscent of the Google Maps image currently being discussed. It measures over 300 meters in diameter and is up to 125 meters deep. Belize has long been high on my list of desired travel destinations since I once made it my hobby to visit as many unknown and exotic countries as possible, and for most Central American tourists, Belize probably isn't on the itinerary, so if I ever get there, I'll definitely check out the Great Blue Hole, but without diving, I prefer a safe beach with solid ground under my feet. Geologically speaking, these blue holes are actually what are known as sinkholes. A sinkhole is a depression in the ground. They can also occur on land, as is the case here in Montenegro. Sometimes these sinkholes fill with water. This is how the famous Red Lake in Croatia was formed, for example, a so-called collapse sinkhole. So you could say that blue holes are sinkholes in the ocean. But what about our mysterious Google Maps photo? The truth is astonishing. It's not a hole at all, but an island covered in dense vegetation. If you zoom in a bit closer, you can make out the tree line. This is Vostok Island, which belongs to the South Pacific nation of Kiribati. Incidentally, Kiribati is the only country in the world that spans all 4 hemispheres, and one of its remote islands is the small Vostok Island, a so-called coral island. The island is 700 by 600 meters long and completely uninhabited. Due to the lack of human settlement and the dense jungle, it looks from above as if the island were completely black, almost like a black hole in the ocean. But the North Sea also holds its own secrets. Imagine being able to walk from the European mainland to England 10,000 years ago without getting your feet wet. No English Channel, no stormy North Sea, just vast fertile land as far as the eye can see. That was Doggerland. As early as the 17th century, Dutch fishermen known as the Doggers, after whom the region was named, were fishing there. At the height of its expansion about 10,000 years ago, Doggerland covered an area of 45,000 square kilometers according to the latest estimates. That's slightly larger than the Netherlands. At that time, Great Britain was not an island, but a peninsula connected to the European mainland. At that time, we were at the end of the last ice age. Gigantic glaciers had trapped unimaginable amounts of water, and sea levels were about 120 meters lower than today. As the glaciers retreated and the climate became milder, a true oasis of life developed on Doggerland. There was fresh water, birds, fish, and we're talking about an area so vast that entire cultures could flourish there. The landscape was likely incredibly diverse. Modern seismic surveys have shown that there were forests, vast grasslands, lakes, rivers, and even steep limestone cliffs. But did people really live there? Most likely, yes. The first evidence came in 1931, when a fishing boat pulled a carved antler tip from the sea 40 kilometers off the coast of Norfolk. A 12,000-year-old harpoon. Since then, fishermen have repeatedly retrieved tools, animal bones, and even human remains from the North Sea. But the truly spectacular discoveries were made by researchers at a site called Boldner Cliff off the coast of the Isle of Wight. Here, in 11 meters of water, archaeologists found over 1,000 artfully crafted flint tools, remains of fire pits, and pieces of wood showing signs of working. Even more fascinating, DNA analyses of the sediments revealed traces of einkorn, one of the oldest domesticated grains. This means that the people of Doggerland had already been in contact with the first farmers of southern Europe 8,000 years ago and were part of a far-reaching trade network. But as we know today, this Atlantis of the North Sea eventually sank beneath the waves. This is where the story gets truly dramatic because it wasn't the gradual rise in sea level caused by melting glaciers. No, about 8,200 years ago, a catastrophe occurred. Off the coast of Norway, a gigantic section of the continental slope slid into the sea. The Storegga slide, as researchers call this event, was massive. 3,500 cubic kilometers of material plunged into the depths. That is enough to cover the entire island of Iceland to a depth of 34 meters. This submarine avalanche triggered a mega tsunami that swept across the North Atlantic coast with waves up to 20 meters high. Doggerland was also hit, and for a long time, researchers thought that had been the final end. The latest research by Vincent Gavney and his team shows that Doggerland likely survived this tsunami. Our data suggests that the landscape initially recovered from this flooding, explains Gavney. The final demise of Doggerland therefore did not occur until sometime after the Storegga slide. Traces of DNA in sediment layers prove that above the tsunami deposits, there were further signs of plants and animals. This means that part of Doggerland may have defied rising sea levels for centuries as an archipelago of islands. It was only about 7,500 years ago, as sea levels continued to rise, that these last islands disappeared forever beneath the waves of the North Sea. Since then, the sea has concealed all traces of this sunken world. Today, researchers are using state-of-the-art technology to map this sunken world. They use sonar, seismic measurements, and DNA analyses from drill cores to unlock the secrets of the seabed. The Lost Frontiers project at the University of Bradford is systematically mapping the prehistoric landscapes of the North Sea. But is all of this really as spectacular as it sounds? I think so. Because remember, just a few meters below the seafloor of the North Sea lie the remains of a civilization. And by the way, there are already ideas on how to raise Doggerland from the depths to expand the territorial waters of the North Sea coastal states. Let's get straight to the real Atlantis. In the middle of the Sahara, visible only from space, lies a structure that is so perfectly circular and so enormous that it must have been created by humans. We're talking about the so-called Eye of the Sahara, the Richat Structure. The Richat Structure in Mauritania is gigantic, measuring about 50 kilometers in diameter. This massive formation has actually been a familiar landmark for astronauts since the earliest manned space missions. But when viewed from the ground, its full splendor is barely discernible. Sand dunes, shimmering heat, and uneven terrain conceal its true shape. Only from space does the complete structure reveal itself in all its beauty, and it was precisely this perfectly circular shape that puzzled scientists for decades. What on earth drew this target in the middle of the desert? There are many hypotheses circulating on the internet, from the remains of the legendary Atlantis to a structure that only extraterrestrial forces could have created. At first glance, the most obvious explanation seems to be a meteorite impact. So perfectly round, so precisely structured, it must have been a gigantic cosmic impact, right? A meteorite that struck here millions of years ago and left behind a massive crater. But new findings tell a very different story. During recent on-site investigations, scientists found no evidence of a meteorite impact. Instead, they discovered something much more subtle and in many ways even more impressive. a deeply eroded geological dome. About 100 million years ago, a gigantic bubble of molten rock pushed its way up from below. Imagine it as a giant geological pimple on the Earth's crust. This magma bubble gently lifted the overlying sedimentary layers upward, forming a dome-like structure. The magma itself never reached the surface, but it caused the rock layers above it to bulge upward. Over millions of years, nature then ground and eroded this dome. In the process, the softer rock layers were worn away more quickly than the harder ones. The harder rocks, such as quartz-rich sandstone, resisted erosion and remained standing as high ridges. The softer layers in between were washed away to form valleys. The result is a natural cross-section through the Earth's crust, peeled back layer by layer in concentric rings. The outer rings consist mainly of erosion-resistant rock, while the interior exposes older layers that once lay deep beneath the surface. Parts of this structure are therefore 100 million years old. The European Space Agency, ESA, recently captured spectacular new images of the Richat Structure using the Copernicus Sentinel-2 satellite mission, and these images reveal details that were not previously visible. In the false color images, scientists combine different wavelengths of light to highlight various materials and surface features. In these images, the harder, quartz-rich sandstones appear in shades of red and pink, tracing the outer rings and inner ridges. Darker areas between these rings mark zones of softer, more eroded rock. The dark area surrounding the structure is part of the Adra Plateau, a sedimentary rock formation that rises about 200 meters above the surrounding desert sand. This sand, in turn, is part of the Erg Urain, an immense expanse of sand stretching hundreds of kilometers all the way to Mali. So is the Atlantis hypothesis dead? Some people actually claim that the Richat structure is the remains of the sunken city of Atlantis. According to this view, the structure fits perfectly with Plato's description of Atlantis as a central island surrounded by 3 alternating rings of land and water. And indeed, if you look at the Richat structure, it has a central landmass surrounded by 3 large ridges with depressions in between. The hypothesis suggests that this area was once at sea level and that the depressions were filled with water. As evidence, they cite satellite images that allegedly show significant amounts of salt in the rings of the Richat structure. This would prove that salt water once filled these rings. Furthermore, the surrounding sand is said to show traces of a massive tsunami that would have devastated any settlement just like in Atlantis. Sounds totally exciting, but there's probably nothing to it. For one thing, the Richat structure is hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest ocean, and there is no geological evidence that this area was at sea level in historical times. For another, the rock layers there are demonstrably up to 100 million years old and entirely of natural origin. There are no traces of human settlements, such as wall remains, pottery, or tools. The salt in the rings can be explained much more easily in geological terms. It consists of mineral deposits from evaporated groundwater. The alleged tsunami traces also do not stand up to scientific scrutiny. The sand deposits fit perfectly with wind transport and desert erosion. And besides, Plato does not describe Atlantis as a Stone Age ruin in the middle of the desert, but as a highly developed Bronze Age civilization in the Mediterranean region. Yeah, I know, I'm a killjoy, sorry folks, but the true story of the Richat structure is far more exciting than any Atlantis theory anyway, a gigantic eye formed by nature gazing out into space. Our final stop on our journey to mysterious places takes us down under to Australia. Researchers at Curtin University in Australia have discovered something in the Pilbara region that is rewriting the history of our planet. The region is known for its ancient rocks, but what the scientists have now found there is truly spectacular. In an area called North Pole Dome, they have discovered distinctive rock formations known as shatter cones. The shatter cones at the site, about 40 kilometers west of Marble Bar in Western Australia's Pilbara region, were formed when a meteorite struck the area at more than 36,000 kilometers per hour. But what exactly are shatter cones? Imagine hitting a rock with a hammer. Normally the rock would break into irregular pieces, but when a meteorite strikes at enormous speed, it creates incredible pressure that causes the rock to shatter in a very specific way. Cone-shaped structures form somewhat resembling an upside-down ice cream cone, and it is precisely these kinds of structures that the researchers have found. The shatter cones discovered in Australia are particularly well preserved. They display fine structures that, according to the researchers, are a clear sign of the enormous shockwave caused by the impact. These geological formations help scientists better understand the formation of impact structures and thus draw parallels to other impact sites on Earth. The structure that scientists have now discovered in Australia's Pilbara region is gigantic. The North Pole Dome has a diameter of about 40 to 45 kilometers, suggesting an original crater with a diameter of at least 100 kilometers. By comparison, the largest known crater on Earth, the Redefort crater in South Africa, has a diameter of about 300 kilometers. The energy released was so immense that it not only shattered the rock, but also melted and vaporized it. This impact occurred at a time when the Earth was just over 1 billion years old. The continents as we know them today did not yet exist, and life, if it existed at all, consisted only of the simplest microorganisms. But the most fascinating thing about this discovery is what it reveals to us about early Earth history. Until now, there has been a major gap in our understanding of the early Earth. For example, when we look at the moon, we see a surface pockmarked with craters. Logically, the Earth, which is much larger and has stronger gravity, should have suffered even more impacts during that time than the moon, yet somehow the evidence was missing. The oldest known impact crater on Earth was the 2.2 billion year old Yarraboba crater, also in Western Australia. This new discovery fills that gap and confirms that the early Earth was indeed plagued by massive meteorite impacts, and that has enormous implications for our understanding of how the Earth evolved. These early impact craters created environments conducive to microbial life, such as hot water pools. With their hot springs, chemical gradients, and energy sources, impact craters offer ideal conditions for the emergence of life. This discovery could therefore not only change our conception of Earth's geological history, but also our understanding of how and where life on our planet could have begun in the first place. The enormous amounts of energy released during such impacts may even have influenced the formation of the first continents. The force of the impact may have caused part of the Earth's crust to be pushed beneath another section, or cause magma from the deep mantle to rise to the surface. Now you might be wondering, how did the researchers determine the crater's age in the first place? They found a layer of carbonate rocks lying directly above the shatter cones. This rock limits the age of the impact to 3.47 billion years. Interestingly, this age matches that of the oldest known spheral bed from the Kapwald Craton in South Africa, suggesting that the North Pole Dome may have produced deposits of global extent. Spherules are small spherical particles that form when molten rock is ejected into the atmosphere and then rains back down to Earth. So we may have found not only the world's oldest crater, but also the source of one of the oldest known global catastrophic events. And by the way, this isn't the only ancient meteorite impact in the region. In higher strata within the East Pilbara terrain, a spheral layer was found that points to another large but more distant impact approximately 10 million years after the North Pole impact. All of this shows us that the early Earth was a much more dynamic and extreme place than we had previously assumed. These massive meteorite impacts literally shaped our planet's surface and may have created the conditions under which life could emerge in the first place. The rarity of verified impact craters suggests that either the impact rate was much lower than predicted by lunar data, or that the evidence has been destroyed, or that we simply haven't recognized it yet. I'm absolutely fascinated by the idea that we can still learn such fundamental things about the history of our own planet. I hope you found these curious places just as exciting as I did. I'll of course keep you updated on all new discoveries and findings here on the channel, so hit the subscribe and like buttons now if you enjoyed the video. And now let's switch planets. During the Cold War, the Soviets attempted something utterly insane. They sent probes to Venus, a planet with atmospheric pressure that would crush you like a tin can, and temperatures high enough to melt lead. I'll show you everything that happened during these daring missions and what the Soviets really saw there in the next video up on the right. Be sure to click on it. It's turned out to be really exciting. As always, you'll find another video about science and space down on the right. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.